Where's Chris? There's all kinds of echoes.
Mike is on.
Mike's on.
Echo. Mike.
Calling this Newington Board of Education to order. It's Wednesday, January 11th, 2023. The time now is 7:03 p.m. As you are able, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, I'm going to ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Michael Miranda.
Here.
Danielle Rose. Here. Fletcher.
Here.
Bethany.
Here.
Here.
Amy Parati.
Here.
Sam Sharma.
Here.
You said it.
Jessica Weaver.
Here.
Anastasia Yap. I have everyone here except Anastasia. Yeah.
And this, oh, okay. Yeah, she's not in there. All right. Could we possibly get the volume turned up, Craig, so that if somebody speaks online or? All right. So at this time, we're going to move to agenda item B, which is our presentation of awards and proclamations. And our first presentation is going to be our Everyday Hero Award. And this Everyday Hero Award is going to be presented to Dan Diaz, the principal of John Wallace Middle School, in recognition of your positive impact on students and staff, and for contributing to equity efforts ensuring that all students have a relevant and rigorous curriculum and find academic success, and for making positive changes for students and educators. Congratulations, Mr. Diaz. All right, we're going to open the floor up to you, Mr. Diaz.
Oh, well, thank you so much. It's quite an honor to be recognized by the Everyday Hero Award. I know many of the individuals that have been recognized, and they're all stellar educators. So it's an honor to be with them. And, I can really just thank my staff. We have an amazing staff at John Wallace, and every day they come to work, they do their best and work their hardest to ensure every student has an equitable and excellent education. And to my central office team as well, a lot of our equity efforts that we've been doing, it all starts with them and the learning that we're doing together. So it's an honor. We're happy to do it with all of our students, and it's a wonderful school community at John Wallace. So thank you all very much.
All right, so my understanding is you were nominated by Brianna Peralt. Would she like to say anything? Your microphone is off?
Can I unmute it?
You could try.
No.
It is
Looks-
showing mute. I don't know why it is.
Yeah.
But it is.
For some reason, your microphone will not come off mute.
Yeah.
All right. Well, if it happens to come back on later, we'll try to circle back around to you, okay?
Oh.
Bruno, what, maybe you could try to come in and out of the meeting while we're going around the table. That sometimes does work, the trick of leaving and coming back. Just gonna do.
Okay, in the meantime, before we have any comments, I am going to read the next presentation. Trying to find the place to read it. Are there names in the presentation?
Oh, right there.
This was
Oh, there she is. Go ahead. Go ahead.
This is acknowledging our entire music program
Okay,
and but two people that are here to accept it.
gotcha.
Oh, yeah, here.
It's like we get a little flip.
Go ahead, Brianna.
Yes, sorry. Hi, my daughter fixed it. She's a sixth grader at John Wallace. I'm lucky enough to be a social studies teacher at John Wallace Middle School, teaching eighth grade U.S. history. And I just wanted to, be here to support and see that Mr. Dias, that Dan received this award. Really, my reason for nominating him is as a leader of a school community that is moving in a direction in which we're ensuring equitable experiences for all our students. Dan has been a patient and kind leader. When I look at leadership qualities and characteristics, we've been talking with my own students about that. And Dan offers a listening ear when anytime we have a question about what might be coming up with these with practices. And I'm just really proud of the work that we're doing in Newington Public Schools and seeing a lot of really great results academically and also socially in our building. So thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, so next up, I'm going to read this certificate of accomplishment that has been presented to Newington Public Schools in recognition of being named a NAMM Foundation 2022 Best Community for Music Education. The outstanding work you do at school sets a profound example for music programs across our state. Through a period of intense change and adaptation, your schools persevered in serving your students and assuming that music was at the forefront of providing a well-rounded education to children and families in your district. Your commitment to educating Connecticut's youngest learners and helping them reach their fullest potential brings tremendous pride to the state of Connecticut. It is my privilege to honor you and to represent you in the United States Senate. Signed, Christopher S. Murphy, United States Senator. So to acknowledge this award tonight, we have Chris Civitillo and Brian Kelly. So whichever one of you wants to go first, go ahead.
I'll go first. Thank you very much for the honor. One of the questions when we were filling out the survey was talking about, how our department was adapting to the post-COVID year and the COVID pandemic. And what my answer to that was, our whole department really stepped up. Like everybody, we were on Google Meets right away. We were figuring out how to get our students to not only have a safe music experience, but a meaningful music experience. And I think all of our department really just stepped that up, and we were able to do that. And like I said, we really are appreciative of this great honor. So thank you.
All right, Brian, you are muted, Brian.
Is that better? Okay.
There
good.
you go.
I would echo what Chris said, and take it one step further that, the music staff is really cohesive. Taking it a step further working together from a vertical alignment standpoint. So we talk about what the kids need the skills they need to master going to the high school, going to the middle school, and we work collaboratively to figure out what's best for kids and still maintain that rigor that we want for the program. So this is fantastic. Thank you so much to all of you and to everyone else who recognized us for this honor. We really appreciate it.
All right, and thank you very much. And now I'll open it up for the board for comments. We'll move around the table. Start with Danielle.
All right, so thank you, Mr. Diaz, for everything that you do. I know being an administrator in this time is never easy, but my heart goes out to the music program. So thank you, Mr. Kelly and Mr. Siv. It was nice to come in and see Mr. Siv's, his face was nice and big when I came in. So what I see from the music program, Beyond Music, is they build leaders. And you build strong people who have a voice and are proud of who they are as individuals. And I just want to thank you. So well-deserved a shout out to you both and your whole program.
Thank you. Amy?
Very nice said, Danielle. Yes, congratulations to everyone. Thank you for all your work.
All right.
Yes, my love fest. Personal shout out to Mr. Diaz because he was not only my ninth grade history teacher, but also is an incredible administrator. I was just at the John Wallace PTA PAC meeting, and just even that, he runs so well, and he's just such a great leader. And I know we've had so many presentations by you before at this board meetings, particularly on equitable equity and looking at, how we can talk about disciplining our students in a very responsible way and looking at how we can have better outcomes for our students. And that was one of the presentations, one of my first terms on this board that really stood out to me. So kudos to you for continuing that work, and to your staff for recognizing you. It's always great to see the relationships that our administrators and our teachers foster. And to our music department, thank you so much for all that you do. I think Mr. Siv was one of the first people who to set up my keyboard in like middle school. And Mr. Kelly is, wow, just like both of you are institutional names. I think it's one of the things that kids go home and you talk about. They talk about their music teachers because they're so proud of either learning a note or getting a, one phrase of a song down. And those are things that stay. It teaches such disciplines as patience and truly the learning of practice, even though I didn't practice as much as I should. So just incredible that you are being recognized. We congratulate you and continue to do the great work because our music program is the best.
Thank you. Anastasia, do you want to comment?
Well, I came in kind of late, but I want to say congratulations and thank you. We appreciate everything you do.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Branda?
Thanks. I'm not sure if you saw Mr. Diaz's comment in the chat. That might be an NCTV thing, but a camera is black on the screen. So, well, sticking with Mr. Diaz, first of all, when we were getting set up, I love the fact that your family was all around, like getting ready for you to get that award. That was really cool to see. You're just a great representative for our district and everything that we're doing and trying to do, and such a great leader inside John Wallace. So thank you to you for all your leadership and for everything that you do to support the students and the staff there in that building. To the music department, I've had a brief but wonderful experience with the music department. My daughter actually just decided one day that she wanted to play an instrument, and I thought the best thing about our music department was how Mr. Kelly just took her in and gave her a chance, and it was kind of in the middle of the program, and she just really wanted to do it. And to be honest, she didn't practice enough, so she didn't stick with it, but Mr. Kelly really, really tried. And I think it's a really great example of the great work that our music department does. They're very welcoming. They challenge students, and they create leaders in not only, musical ways, but just all around. They head on up to high school from John Wallace and they get involved in more than just music. And I think our music department has a lot to do with that. So just thank you to you both and to the entire music department for everything that you do for the students.
I wanted to echo what Mr. Branda said about Mr. Diaz with his daughters next to him. I think to be an educator and a parent those are two really challenging yet rewarding jobs, and especially to be an administrator as like an extra lift. So I just have incredible admiration and respect for you as a fellow educator. And to echo what everybody else said about the music program, I think this town's music program really sets it apart. And that's been since I was, playing clarinet way back way back when, and just the quality of the performances and the true character that it builds in our students. And just going back to at the high school, the dinner theater that I went to earlier in October, students were obviously singing and really incredibly talented, but then and talking to parents and whatnot, finding out that they were also leaders of other organizations and involved in sports. And I think that tapping into that musical creative side of a student really helps them also tap into that other side of themselves and makes them a really well-rounded citizen prepared for our world. So thank you for what you do.
Thank you. And then we have two members online. Would either one of you like to speak? Go ahead, Sam.
Hey, so I just want to thank Mr. Diaz and also Chris and Brian from the music department. Thanks for everything you do. It's such inspiring work. So keep up the good work and thanks. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And first of all, I want to acknowledge Mr. Diaz, one of my former bosses. Great guy. You're doing a great job. And I do appreciate everything that you're doing, and the music teachers. I used to love to hear you guys working with the kids and hearing the music. I have been the recipient in a church of having kids that have come through the Newington system as musicians come and be a part of my musical team. So they have great quality. So you guys are doing a great job, and I appreciate that very much. And one thing about music, it does teach discipline, and it's a great thing. So I want to acknowledge that and thank you, all of you, for everything that you are doing.
So, Mr. Diaz, just to add on to what's been said, we surprised him. I surprised him with this award. I told him it was happening at a PD last Friday, but ironically, the professional development was about equity efforts and avoiding deficit thinking, and he did a fabulous job. And I do think he's making some nice inroads at his school. So, and really, it's a John Wallace night. I'm seeing a lot of teachers here from John Wallace. And then for the music folks, just a sidebar story. I was at a Teacher of the Year function today with our current Teacher of the Year, Jen, and ran into a semifinalist from Simsbury, and she goes, yeah, you guys have she's a music teacher. You guys have a great music program in Newington. I'm like, great. So Teachers of the Year from other districts are saying we have a great program, and I already knew that because anytime I see parents in the community, music comes up all the time. So we couldn't be prouder of our programs, and it is one of our many spotlights, and the folks on the line tonight are truly outstanding educators. So thank you.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you very much. All right. So at this time, we're going to move on to agenda item C, which is our public participation on any matter related to board responsibilities. You can call in. The phone number is 860-665-8659, or you can raise your hand here in the Google Meet and I will acknowledge you. We do limit our civil participation to 3 minutes. And we will give a moment for that. Well, I'm hearing crickets. Okay, well, thank you all so very much. And now we're going to move into agenda item D. What I'm going to do is I'm going to move down to item 6, which is going to be the report from the student reps, because we are going to be discussing student policy and possibly taking action on some of those later anyway.
Hello, everyone. So obviously my counterpart here, Trisha, is online tonight. I don't know if she's on the Google Meet right now, but that was the plan. Seeing as we've just come back from break, there's not a lot going on right now. Mostly teachers are preparing for midterms, which are coming up. I know the high school has midterms starting Friday, falling through the next week, and the middle schools are shortly after that. So in terms of what's coming up right now, so sports, girls basketball won 3 of their games in the last week. They won against E.O. Smith, East Hartford, and last night against Berlin. Hockey has a record of 8-1-3 currently. And track, so indoor track, most track meets are in New Haven because there's no indoor track around our area. But a couple of the athletes from the indoor track team were selected to run at a meet in New York City at the Armory track, where the boys 4x2 had a really great PR. Like both 4x2 teams had really great races. And then Kate Bulkey has had a really great season. She has already broken the school record in the 1,000 and the 600 meter. And with her school record, which also set a meet record at that meet at Southern in the 600 meter, she qualified for New Balance Nationals in Boston for indoor track. And she also broke a record in the mile as well, running a 4:57. So that's what we have for sports. The band concert at the high school was last night. Orchestra and chorus concerts were in December. The chamber choir went to Kellogg and Wallace before break to perform and try to increase interest in chorus at the high school for middle school students who are going to be joining us soon. There's a food drive for the musical that's also being started up soon, and the Drowsy Chaperone rehearsals for our spring musical have started. Also, we had a Spirit Day this last week, Red, White, and Blue Day, or Buffalo Bills Day, to bring attention to the incident with Damar Hamlin and also bring awareness to cardiac health at the high school. Our next theme Thursday is Battle of the Bands, suggested by Miss Tigno. That will be, I think, the week following midterms when everyone's back at school. And we're working on another Spirit Week and school dance in March, as well as a spring pep rally for everyone. Clubs, Stuco had a meeting yesterday to discuss our point system where we get students involved in more activities such as field trips and running for a student council office. DECA has prepared for their competitions in the spring. National Honor Society has begun project proposals in the next couple weeks, and Stop the Stigma. So I will be meeting with Julia Kaczynski and Miss Redmond tomorrow to discuss bringing Stop the Stigma to the middle schools and how that would work in terms of like when we would do it, who would be involved in that, when's a good time to do it, and like what we'd really present. So we're gonna have our first meeting about that tomorrow. And from our middle schools, John Wallace is planning activities and celebrations for Black History Month, and a group of 8th grade students is planning advisory lessons for the entire school to complete in February. And Martin Kellogg received a letter from Human Services in relation to their fundraiser, which helped over 400 households during the holiday season. And they're also looking into a food drive for the upcoming season called the Soup Bowl. So that's what we have for the middle high schools. And everything is just kind of starting to pick up again after break, and then we'll continue after midterms. So that's it.
So Tricia, do you have anything to share?
Yep. Maggie did say a little bit of what I was going to say, but that was because of my connection issues. I did want to add for the music and arts, theater workshop is a course offered at Newington, and now after a little bit of surveying done with the students, we are offering a second theater workshop class, which I know a lot of people are excited about. So today and yesterday, the students in theater workshop for semester 1 put on 1 acts during their class periods before midterms, of course. And they were allowed to invite students from other classes or students that had open period to come see them. There was a great turnout for that. I went to the 1 acts put on by the period 1 class and the period 5 class. So there was 3 1 acts done total. And all of them were really great to watch. Like the students had put in a lot of effort into it. And on top of that, the senior 1 act, which hasn't been done in a while, is on track to be put on this year by Brooke Hendon and Eli Johnson. The planning is like still going on. There hasn't been like a 1 act that's been chosen to do yet, but they're the students who are going to be doing that. And then there is also a new equity and inclusion club popping up at Newington High School run by Miss Freese. It kind of goes hand in hand with GSA, and So information about that is going out, and a lot of students from GSA are joining that club as well, but it's welcome for any student to join if they would like. And for English Honor Society and Science Honor Society, there are a few updates. So for Science Honor Society, we had a guest speaker who told us about their high school and college experience and gave us advice on moving into STEM-related fields. And English Honor Society has done a few service projects with kids from the elementary school and people from the senior center in Newington, and we have this like little pen pal program going on, which is super exciting. And yeah, that's about it for me.
All right, thank you. You have anything else to add? All right, so I'm going to open it up for the board for questions and comments. We'll start here with Beth.
Hi, thank you both so much for your detailed report. I love that the Stop the Stigma program is being brought to the middle school. I know that's something that we've all really looked forward to, and I think a lot of good can come from that. So really excited about that. I wanted to inquire, I believe it was earlier in the year, there was a survey that went out that checked on students' kind of well-being and their mental health and how they're feeling. Wanted to inquire, and you might not know, either of you, but if we can just find out if that survey will be given again this year, and then if we can kind of look at that data. I just think that mental health is really important. I think especially in high school, when the pressures of applying for colleges and managing sports and music and clubs and classes, it's a lot. And so I just want to check in and make sure that our Newington students are doing well. And if they're not, then it can come to our level as a board, and we can really put our heads together and think about what we can do, or perhaps either of you have ideas or suggestions what it would look like, or how to articulate what it is that students need in the form of support if there really is a large amount of students struggling with anxiety, depression, or just feeling the weight of it all. So thank you.
So I'm not sure if there's another forum coming out. We could look into that because I think it is a really good idea to check in, because seeing as the last one came at the end of the last year, so a lot of new students have come to the school since, and it's been a while, and a lot of the policies have also changed, including the new advisory programs focused on social emotional learning. So I feel like that would be another good thing to like add into and incorporate for another survey. But I know a lot of people definitely appreciate the concern for mental health, because seeing as not a lot of other communities or districts consider it as much with education the same way. So I think it is really impactful to students, and like appreciated that they are considered both as like physical students, but also their mental well-being as well.
One thing that I wanted to add is just something that I've noticed often when I'm in school. A lot of students like when they go to counselors' offices or social workers' offices, they don't really get a chance to have an audience with their social worker or counselor, because there's just so many students who require that kind of attention at that time. And I think it is a little bit of an issue, because like at sometimes like there's students who are like a lot more comfortable with their counselors and go to speak with them more often, and they understand that like sometimes their counselor isn't always available. But for students who like haven't really gone to their counselors often and like are going for the first time because they're in a crisis, they're like in the office and they don't really know what they're able to do, and because they can't get the attention of their counselor, they just decide not to go again. And I think that it would be a nice thing, and I know it's very hard to achieve this, but it would be nice if we could have more social workers and counselors, just so that like one, our counselors and social workers aren't overworked, because I see them taking in a lot of students every day, but also so that it's just not a room full of a giant group of students all of the time, which can be very overwhelming for students. Because like I spend my open period working with Miss Miller for DECA because I'm a DECA officer, and right across the hall is Miss Arnett's office, who is the academy counselor. And I see a lot of the time when one of the social workers aren't there, I think like specifically like students who go to Miss Robles for lunch, when Miss Robles isn't there, they come all up into Miss Arnett's office to have lunch instead. And then students who have Miss Arnett as a counselor just like feel very overwhelmed when they go into that office. So I just think that was something that I should bring to light.
And to add on to Trisha's point as well, we understand the counselors do have a lot going on, but if there could be like maybe some differentiation between like a counselor for like your career planning, like getting your credits, making sure your classes are like put together on top of everything academically, but also then in terms of like, how are you doing in school, like mentally, socially, and emotionally, like, are you doing okay? Because a lot of times if people are going to a counselor to talk about like if they're having like a crisis and need to talk to someone, they might have to like wait in a line outside because someone already has scheduled an appointment for their own social emotional needs or to talk about their class selections. So especially like around like class selection time, it does get really busy. So, but we do like appreciate everyone's concern.
Yes, our students are surfacing an issue that is a concern. Of course, my voice is going to go. So we have written a grant that Ms. Redmond helped write. Actually, she was the brainchild of it to get another counselor at the high school. We're waiting on the outcome of that grant, but concurrently, we are convening a meeting. It's getting scheduled with the next week or two with all the mental health providers at the high school because they're surfacing exactly what you're saying, that they're very overworked. They're having, challenges meeting the needs of all the children, and we're going to kind of brainstorm solutions around that. Currently, we have 2 social workers at the high school, a school psychologist, and I believe 7 counselors. And then we have 3 counselors at each of the middle schools. I had to tabulate all this because it was part of the grant. So those folks, our staffing ratios are pretty good by state standards, but I think what we're grappling with is the aftermath of the pandemic and the ever increasing challenges that students have with stress and mental health. So our students reps, as always, are on the money and identifying issues that are very pressing at the high school. I'll turn it back over to you, Dr. Fletcher.
All right, thank you. Mr. Brando, you were next.
Yeah, I'll be really quick. So first, I do definitely appreciate bringing the Stop the Stigma to the middle schools. I do think it's going to make a big difference, and it might be an opportunity for other clubs too to kind of introduce those middle school students to opportunities for when they get to high school and kind of bring them into an added community to their education that maybe they don't even know exists or something clicks for them. So I think it has a lot of potential. And with that, I just really quick wanted to mention, you talked about how the chamber choir went to the middle schools, and I have a middle schooler who I remember the night before, she's like, the chamber choir is coming to the school. And I was like, oh, you wait and see what this is going to be like. And she's like, well, is it just chorus? I'm like, no. This is not just chorus. Like, this is like chorus, like the big leagues of chorus. And she came back and she's like, they were so amazing. And again, it's a credit to the music department and all those kids. And I got a chance to talk about how at graduation, like, it's so great when they come on stage with Miss Tigno, like the whole thing. It's just such a awesome part of our district. And they're just such an amazing group of talented singers and performers that I just wanted to make sure that I gave that shout out, and thanks for sharing that.
Thank you for that. That means a lot, and I'll definitely let them know.
Michelle?
So I have a question for Dr. Brummett. So, and just correct me, you said you had counselors at the high school, the middle school. I know in Newington, 4th grade goes into middle school. Do we have a new one at the elementary school level? Oh, 5th grade. Yeah, that's fine. Do we have anyone at the elementary school level in regards to maybe those children who need some sort of, counseling or just an outlet? Do we have that?
Yes, at the K-4 level, we have a psychologist at every school and a social worker at every school.
And are we seeing that need there as well?
Absolutely. Yes, I would say if we were to have them sitting around the table with us today, they would all say they were extremely busy from the time they arrive to the time they leave and probably beyond. Yes.
And one last question, does the grant, will that allow additional counselors at the elementary school level?
The grant was only up to $120,000, so we could only write it for one position, but Miss Redmond, in her grant design, did write in that she wanted to bring Stop the Stigma to the middle school and bring some of that education to the middle school. But no, if it were awarded, that would be just for the high school. However, we're told there's going to be another round of grants, so if that's what happens, we can look at other opportunities. I know our head of counseling would like to expand school counselors to the elementary as well. So those are all thoughts.
Thank you.
Thank you. You're next.
Thank you, as always. Such great student reps. And thank you, Ms. Hunt-Egner, for asking that. I know last time we kind of talked about that and was thinking about you guys' mental health, especially as midterms come up. I know that is an incredibly stressful time, not just for you. I know I've gotten some texts from teachers who are also very stressed about midterms. So is there an issue? Okay, no worries. Just wanted to thank you for that. And I think one of the things we've really been asking about, not just around this time, but I think budget season, we've always been asking, I think even at one of our retirement dinners, Ms. Guyan from the previous board, we talked about the importance of, she really tried to sneak that social worker in the last budget, really raise that issue before the pandemic. And wow, how could we have known how much that was needed? So we can absolutely hear you on that. And I think it's one of the things we'll probably have to resurface around budget time. I just was curious if there's any plans, proposals for more social workers. I know it's pre-budget focus, but.
I can tell you there was a plans proposal to add school counselors to every elementary school.
Okay. All right. Well, just want to wish you both luck on your midterms and thank you so much for a great update.
So it seems like we've lost our video in the conference room again. There it is. We're back.
I'm just the issue. That's fine.
Okay. Right. Do either of you want to speak? Set. Anyone? Our two board members online, do you have any questions for the student reps? All right. So thank you so very much for being here tonight and sharing all of the updates with us. Look forward to our next meeting. Okay, so we are now going to move on to agenda item E. First up, we're going to have an update on the equity progress. Dr. Brummett, I'll turn it over to you.
Now my mic doesn't want, there it goes. Just to confirm, Dr. Fletcher, you want to reserve the student policy committee discussion to under E, new
Yes.
business. Gotcha.
Yes.
Very good. So it is my pleasure and to provide you with an update tonight on our equity efforts. I have with us this evening Dr. Gerald Hairston, who is our equity and inclusion specialist. He is joined by two of our champions in equity work, Miss Sarah Whalen and Miss Amy Inzero. A quick sidebar story. I was at the State Board of Ed today for an honor for our Teacher of the Year. And believe it or not, the co-chair of the State Board of Ed came up to me. And her name is Erin Benham. And she had recently been to the high school to observe the Black literature studies that we've put forth this year. And she was gushing about it. She was, exuberant. And I said, well, thank you for saying that. I'll be sure to let Sarah Whalen know. But again, all of those tie into the work that we're trying to do to bring forward these opportunities for our students that make them feel included. So with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Hairston, who will give us an overview of what's going to happen tonight with this presentation. Dr. Hairston.
Good evening, everybody. I'm a little bit, I'm trying to switch pages. I've been Doc Ock and Rhino playing Spider-Man with my son for the past half hour. So trying to figure out how to not be a supervillain and just be a plain old equity and inclusion specialist now. So turning the page just swiftly, though, I really appreciate this opportunity to come in and speak with everybody. And my two colleagues are beyond amazing. So I'll have a chance to really embarrass them good before I punt to them in a few minutes. But I did just want to overview some of the work that we've been able to put in place from last year to this year, which will include just a simple, brief overview, and certainly ask whatever questions you need to of me after the fact. But then my colleagues will have a chance to really talk about what the work has meant for them. I believe, and I think you'll find also that they've become some of the best of what Newington can offer in terms of educators, and they really, I think, embody the kind of person that we want to present to the field in terms of what we have here in Newington. I'm honored and humbled by them every day. So, and certainly grateful that I get to work with them. So you'll be just as humbled as well, I'm sure, when they talk about the work that they're doing. So with that, the more broad picture, and I'm not sure who has the presentation duties, but the more broad picture, if you need me to project, just let me know. I shared it with Dr. Brummett, and so she has the link. But first of all, do you need me to share something or no? Do you need me to share my screen? I mean,
Yeah, I mean, that would be up to Amy and Sarah. Go right ahead, Dr. Harris. Once you post it on your screen, that'll make it easier for you to advance them as you see fit.
yeah. Just give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down if you can see it. If you can't, give me a thumbs down. All right. So I'll just give you a chance to take in the visual for a second. You know, this and a second slide are the only ones that we have to present, and then my colleagues will just speak with you. And I'll talk you through it in a minute here, but just take in the visual for what it is. So one of the problems of having to do it this way is to try to essentialize a lot of work. And the scope is really profound in terms of what we've been able to do over the past year and change. So this really is a bare bones presentation of what we could highlight, but I think it does give you a basic sense about the through lines to follow to try to tell the Newington story of growth in this equity space. So the top, without sort of any reference to power in the hierarchy, is just the point of accountability. So I try to center myself as the person who would try to take the lead role and responsibility for making sure that, you know, we have what we need in terms of examination capacity to look at ourselves with an honest lens in terms of the work that we have and the resources that we have available and the capacity that we're developing to really make Newington a space that is centered on equity as we define it. In doing that, we've taken a really thoughtful look using some data and some in-time practice to look at the way we're organized, you know, segments of things in a pattern or systems, the way that we arrange ourselves when we try to accomplish something or a structure, and the culture. So the way we approach how we want to sort of aim at our mission, our aptitude and our attitude combine, our culture. And so that's really sort of been how I've thought about myself relative to the rest of the work that we've developed here in the district. And that's come with last year, at least two primary focus areas. On one side, the work that we can do to support educators and structures and systems and the culture of educators that they have. And then on the other side, we wanted to take particular focus with leadership. And there's an asterisk there beside educator and leadership if you look up on the upper left-hand corner of the E and the L. And that's because that educator encompasses a large swath of professionals. And it's a distinct group. And often last year, we used that term to talk about, you know, classroom instruction, but not exclusively. And leaders the same. You know, I know that can sometimes be a misnomer, but what it really means is the heads of department, folks who are sort of leading the charge in terms of decision making for what people have to do and the way in which they do it in terms of equity work or classroom instruction. So if you follow the through line under educators, what you'll see under there is the sort of primary feature for making the educator work what it is. And it isn't the exclusive feature, but it's the primary feature that we use in this developmental process, and that's the equity teams. And the equity team, the main equity team, is a district one. And so last year we established a team that was made up of a set of 8 to 10 educators at the time, and it quickly blossomed this year to about 13. And that group is able to make some support decisions and some analytic decisions around what educators need, and the extent to which their capacity is growing at a pace that really allows them to do the kind of work that they're interested in and they need to do. That equity team is comprised of, I said, a group of about 13 folks or so right now, and it includes both Amy and Sarah. And they've been there since the beginning. So they've been able to see the work grow and develop and become a really capable group of folks who are able to do things that will really influence the work of the district, not just, curriculum and instruction. Under that, there are 3 areas that, again, don't really fully encapsulate everything that group is a part of or does. But in terms of a flow chart, you get to see how the work breaks down into smaller composite areas. So on the far left, you can see that there's another subunit of equity teams, and that's the school-based teams. Last year, we had 3. This year, every school has an equity team. So not only does the district have capacity to look at itself from the lens of equity through the curriculum and instruction or teaching and learning area, but we also have that capacity to do a more discrete look at equity and teaching and learning for each school building. And they do a similar thing, just not at a sort of a macro view. They take more of a micro context specific look at what produces equity and to what extent equity can be produced from what the educators are doing in that building. They primarily use the language of courageous conversations. If you remember, Glenn Singleton came and spoke to kick off the year, but that text is featured, but it's not the only text. Another familiar text might be culturally responsive teaching in the brain. So we lean on that. And thirdly, we lean on the SRBI framework. So we really developed a canon to establish what we can look at in terms of evidence for why we do what we do and how we do what we do. And that group, both at the district and school level, is the group that we look to really bolster that effort and the implementation, both for the district and for the schools. Book clubs, without going deep in detail about that, that's a sister initiative to the equity teams without having the sort of broad scale look at curriculum and instruction and culturally responsive pedagogy and teaching. Book clubs are really about topical information. So folks opt into, and we've provided some structural, more formal opportunities for people to go in and educate themselves around the topics that interest them, or a capacity area within their overall practice that they really want to bone up. And so that's the space that we've provided for people to take their own thinking to the next level and their own practice to another level of depth. Thirdly, we really wanted to take a serious look at what we do with and in community with families and in partnerships with the community entities that we work, I think, hand in hand with to produce a better Newington every day. So that has now formed itself into a council. And without going into great detail, that's one of our more proud features, that group of folks who we actually met today engaged in a community partnership to formally look at some data that tells us, are we an accessible institution for our communities and families? And we'll have that infrastructure for the life that we want it. We can do that in perpetuity. We don't just have it for a one-off initiative. In fact, the goal of that is to develop a tool and a capacity within that council to work and examine in a perpetual way that will allow us to have fidelity to our mission, not only as an institution of educational expertise, but also a community serving institution. We want to be good at that too. On the other side, it's a much more lean explanation, but we started out with an ad hoc group of administrators who were gathering to look at what leadership did look like in terms of the role that it played in making sure that educators had what they need in order to produce the teaching and learning experiences that we valued. And I don't mean teaching and learning just in the academic tradition. I mean social emotional teaching and learning, and I also mean discipline teaching and learning. So to make sure that educators had what they need to do the job that we need to do in classrooms and in non-educational spaces, we wanted to make sure that educators were provided and were able to provide what they needed to make those things happen. That ad hoc committee became a space that was somewhat redundant to an existing structure, which was admin council. And what we decided to do was to just make sure that admin council was the place that became its own PLC, where leaders could become thought partners for each other and trying to think about how leadership in and of itself could be a space where cultural responsiveness looked a certain way. And so that's what we've really invested our time in, to make sure that leaders know how to use, and excuse me for the like the education language reference, but know how to make leadership moves. So things specific to the leadership space, know how to adjust and monitor to make sure that educators, again, do have what they need to make the decisions and make the moves that they need to make. That work is ongoing, and we tend to focus on the leadership part of supporting culturally responsive pedagogy, and so it can show up in structures, specifically PLCs. That's our core pivot structure. We do a lot of work to make sure that educators are in community with one another, because we do truly believe that the group is greater than the person. So we try to make sure that we engage multiple perspectives so we get the best decision possible on the work that we need to do. To do that, we have grade level, content area PLCs. We have school improvement teams. All of them are professional learning communities, even if they do that based on a different topic, whether it's school improvement writ large or math in the 5th grade. We want educators to have an opportunity to share with one another and develop their own best practice in terms of what is locally best for Newington. Doesn't mean we move away from standards at all. In fact, we take that into account and we lean on that to give us our fidelity, but we also take the license to make sure that we have what we need in order to do the work that we have to do for the students that we have and the culture that we're becoming. We find that that's our best mesh point. And so to really focus on being our best Newington, we use PLCs a lot to do that. Administrators afford the time, the resources, the coaching to make PLCs optimal in terms of the operation. That's our engine for the work. As I kick to my colleagues for a second, I want to just give you a sense about what the next year looks like, or what this current year looks like at a close-up view. I'll give you a second to read that. If you can imagine that the work of year one was to have infrastructure. So that means things developed in different places and at different times and at different rates of growth. So this year, we really want to focus on closing the loop. That looks like operationalizing connection, so that making sure that PLCs and leadership are speaking the same exact language, if not doing the exact same thing as you might find in a book club. That language transfer, that concept transfer is key because we want to ensure cohesion. That's the way we can monitor for fidelity of implementation. So things that we want to come out of our PLCs are only going to be possible if we are working on what we want to be working on. That's the fidelity. Making sure that we're all working on it with a shared and collective sense of responsibility is where the cohesion comes into play. So we work to be transparent with our effort and our aims and our mission. Those leadership decisions and the councils that we have are key in that, because we don't want to have our best efforts just comprised in classrooms. We want to be an entire institution that is working on the multiplied effort of equity. So that is the experience of equity. That's the instruction of equity. That's the outcome of equity. That's the feel of equity. That's the culture of equity. The councils that we have, the Student Voice Council that is developing, the Community Council that I referenced, are all a part of growing out our equity work and making really equity who we are at Newington, so that we can be an excellent and equitable educational institution. We're really honing on the skill of decision making, because like I said about cohesion, we want to make sure not only that we have a collective effort, but we have a clear intentional effort. and the decision-making processes that we use, need to be shored up and efficient in order to do that, in order to be on the same page and be where we need to be in an on-time way. In order to monitor ourselves and be reflective, we believe that we owe it to ourselves to be thoughtful about the resources that we're provided and that we provide others. So we hold up accountability as something that we are not afraid of. And so we will be and are developing and implementing an audit to tell us if we are actually culturally responsive in what we do. We have run a mini audit to just pilot the process. But this year we will be operating more of a larger scale audit to tell us the ways in which we are doing things for the aim that we have, which is to be an equitable place. My two colleagues, I told them that I would try to be brief, and so maybe I've gone past that, but I did want them to have an opportunity to talk about the fact that they are what we want to be in terms of an educational institution. If institutions are broken down to their most finite unit, it's the people. And I believe Amy and Sarah are the best indicators of the kind of excellent educator that gives excellent education that's also equitable at Newington Public Schools. So I just wanted to give them the stage to talk about how they're doing that. So Amy can go first, and then we'll go with Sarah. Thank you, Amy.
Thanks, Gerald. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity tonight to talk about our equity work at eGreen. Back in 2020-21, we had begun somewhat blindly delving into work around identity and racial bias. With the support of Jim Marciano, our principal, who's really passionate about this work, the social worker at the time, and I held a few professional learning sessions for our staff. The following school year, last year, 2021-22, on the very first day of school, Gerald showed up at my door of my office, and I had never formally met him before. And I just began firing questions at him. How do we continue this work? What steps do we need to take? I didn't really know what I was doing or how to do it, but I knew inherently that this was really important work. And so he invited me to be on the district equity team, and my journey began. And what we call Expedition Equity at eGreen started here in our building. So the beginning of last year, we began to dive into the data as a school and as a district. And I have to say, I was shocked. I had been teaching in Newington over 30 years, and I never, ever realized the discrepancies between our students of color and our white students. And it was shocking to me. And so I realized that this truly was the work that we needed to do. We would continue to meet the needs of all of our students, and our teachers are amazing, and they were doing a great job, but we needed to start exploring our relationships with our students of color and our teaching, and just look at things from a different perspective. And so Jim and I kind of started the work here, and we knew that we needed to first start with ourselves. We needed to explore our own racial identity, and we needed to begin to, I'm sorry, my light went off because I'm in my office. We needed to begin to we needed to begin to learn about different races and become more conscious about other races, and raise that cultural consciousness. And so and so we began just researching and having conversations and challenging each other on our identities and on what we knew about race. And we began having conversations with our staff members of color and our students of color and our families. And we just worked on raising our awareness of ourselves and of others. And we knew that that was where we needed to start as well with our staff. And so it's just getting darker and darker in here. I'm sorry. Can you, 1 second, hold on 1 second. Thank you. I'm so sorry. And so we knew that that was where we needed to begin with our staff. So we put in systems and structures into place to begin last year to raise that awareness. And we planned a few PLs last year that focused on identity and focused on racial bias and deficit thinking. And we put protocols into place for our professional learning communities, for our classroom teachers, protocols that ensured that our teachers would be looking at subgroups during their meetings and analyzing the data and figuring out the stories that the data told. Our teachers, again, are just so wonderful, and they wanted to fix the data. And we worked in our PLCs to help raise that awareness and understand that it was about states of being and how we were showing up with our students, and especially our students of color. We also worked on our early intervention process structure that we had in place, but we started to talk last year about moving it from a deficit-based model to more of a strengths-based model. And we also set up our school equity team, and we worked on, again, having conversations, courageous conversations around race and various scenarios regarding race. And so we set up those systems and structures, and the work, it was challenging. But as we're moving through this year, we're noticing a shift in the culture. We had at least 12 staff members who volunteered to be on our school equity team at the beginning of the year. We're up to, I want to say, 15 or 16 members. We had to split our school equity team in two because we had so many people who were so invested in this work. And our staff is just has become so willing to have these courageous conversations. And perhaps the most impactful and apparent changes in our culture has been in the relationships that our teachers have strengthened with students, and especially our students of color. They did a lot of identity work at the beginning of this year, and they've been working really hard to get to know the families and to get to know their cultures and where they're coming from in a way that they never have before. It's easier most often to understand where our white students are coming from when we are predominantly white staff. Our teachers are now discovering so much more as they're delving into student identities and working on relationships with the students and the families. Our professional learning sessions have moved towards understanding race and cultures a little bit more, again, through courageous conversations and videos and reading, and especially focusing on the strengths and assets of those races and cultures. Our PLCs, teachers are still working on that awareness piece, and they're moving into culturally responsive teaching practices, forming intentional learning partnerships with students, and continuing to strengthen relationships and figure out what works best. In our EIP meetings, we're moving towards not just an asset-based model, but thinking about what are some of the cultural assets and strengths that students and families bring to the table as we're developing plans for them. And in our school equity team, we're continuing to have courageous conversations and learn about race so that we can continue that work throughout the building and in our PLCs. And we're focusing on celebrating and utilizing the strengths and assets of our students and their families in our Elizabeth Green community. This work has been the most challenging and humbling work of my 30 plus years here in Newington, and the most rewarding. And our goal is for all students to be leaders in our school, and especially our students of color who have been historically marginalized and haven't always had that opportunity. We want our students to feel seen. We want them to feel heard, to feel validated, and we just want them to feel good about themselves as part of our eGreen family. And so I look forward to continuing this work with Gerald and our district equity team and my colleagues. And thank you all for your support.
Thank you, ma'am. Sarah, off you go. Thank you, Amy.
Hi, everyone. I'm a little anxious about this because my internet connection keeps freezing. Hopefully we'll be okay. When it does, it seems to catch back up pretty quickly. So you'll have to let me know if there's a problem and you can't hear me. Like Gerald and Amy, I just want to thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk a little bit about the equity work we've been doing in the English and Language Arts Department. A few years ago, we began to recognize that something we were doing in English and Language Arts wasn't working for a lot of our students anymore. As time went on, it became more and more apparent that our students were not as engaged as they once were. They weren't as interested in what we were doing or what we were trying to do. And that manifested itself largely in students not reading. And they made it very clear to us that they were not reading the books that we were giving them. And when students don't read, they can't grow as readers and writers. And so we recognized that there was a problem, but we didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to do. Honestly, I didn't even know how to begin the conversation to start to address these issues. And what I learned as a result of the district's focus on equity, and particularly from Dr. Hairston, was that the conversation had to start with me. It had to start internally. I had to start asking myself an educational experience and how that impacted what I thought kids needed. And one example of that is the books we were giving kids. When we stopped and reflected on what we were doing, we realized that the books we were giving kids at Newington High School, the texts we were putting in their hands, were the same books that I was given when I was a student 30 or 40 years ago in the 1980s, late 80s, but still the 1980s, and they're the same titles. I don't really know how that could be, considering how much we've grown, how much more we know about the brain, how much more we know about how we learn. We know so much more about the science behind reading, about effective assessment practices. How is it possible that we're using the same materials? I'm using the same materials that we were using 30 and 40 years ago. And so we had to do some really difficult work reflecting on why we were making the choices that we were making. And one of the things we discovered is that because we are a pretty homogenous group of educators, it's an entirely white department, for example, mostly women. And we're all within a generation of our own education. So because we're bringing our experiences as learners to the table, we're giving students what we know. We're sharing our own backgrounds, our own life experiences, the texts that we read and love with them. And what we're learning is that it's not working for a number of our students now because they're not the same people that we were. First of all, because generationally we're different. And Newington has also become a much more diverse district than it was, as you know, even just 10 years ago. What our students are interested in, what they like, it's different. And if we're only bringing our own perspectives and views to them, many of them aren't going to be interested. So we had to do some difficult work of stepping outside of ourselves, thinking about other perspectives, really thinking about who our students are and what they need, what they are interested in, what they care about, what's relevant in their lives, and trying to bring some of that forward. So we first stopped and reflected and did that work. And when we figured out at least one piece of what was going wrong, the next step was accepting the challenge of change. And that is still, I can't say it's not past tense. We're still working through accepting that challenge of needing to change. And it's not been easy. But we have slowly begun to change. For example, we have the language now to talk to parents and each other and students about difficult issues, including race. We didn't have the language to do that before. We're doing a better job than we've ever done communicating with parents about what's happening in terms of literacy in Newington Public Schools. We're going to get better at it, but we're doing better than we were in the past. We're also adding new perspectives, adding new authors to our texts. We're embedding choice in our offerings to students so that they can choose what speaks to them. We're making sure that students can see themselves in some of the texts we present to them and that they can see others as well. It's happened as a result of the leadership of Dr. Brummett and Dr. Hairston. And I think that what I was thinking about, what is my overall takeaway about this work so far in the past 2 years? And I think it is that what I've learned is that equity work, at least for me, has not so much been about what I'm doing specifically. It's about how I think about what I'm doing. It's about how teachers think about what we're doing. It's about the questions we're willing to ask ourselves. Because the specific moves we make matter less than the thought and work that goes behind making those decisions. Thank you.
Sarah. Thank you, Sarah. Dr. Brummett, we give you back the floor. I'm not sure what the next order of course is, but we appreciate, again, I just want to reiterate from my colleagues and from myself that we appreciate the time that we've had. And so whatever is next. But Dr. Brummett, we give you back the floor.
Thank you, Dr. Hairston, Sarah, and Amy. And I do appreciate your comments tonight. I think you have illuminated many of the things we're working on, but in many ways, there's so much more to that. In fact, pretty much all of our principals plan to update the board what's going on in their schools. But tonight you heard about the e-green journey to a certain level and also our ELA journey, which, as Sarah has mentioned, has been a challenge, but we're getting to the point where I think we're getting our students more engaged in our reading. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Fletcher to see if he wanted to open it up for any questions with the board, but you have my sincere thanks for letting the board see at least the last 2 years of our journey and what it looks like in certain departments and schools. So thank you.
All right. Thank you. So we will take a moment, and if there's anyone on the board that does have a question or a comment you'd like to make, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you so much to everyone for presenting and for giving us just a bite of what you do. I just had a question about the equity team. I believe we were just talking specifically to eGreen, but how many teachers are on the social equity teams across all the schools?
If you mean how many in some after you add up each of the teachers per team per school?
Correct. Yeah.
That I don't know, but I could certainly email that to you. But they range in size, so they would be as small as, and this is an approximation of around 6 to up to Amy's, which is about around 15 or 16.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Anyone else have a question? Ms. Yap, go ahead.
Thank you for everything you stated. I just wanted to say I'm ecstatic, Gerald. Hi, Gerald. That this is even happening. Growing up myself in a predominantly white community, not in Newington, we didn't have these opportunities, and it was hard to be understood. You were just, supposed to fall in line, essentially. So, seeing that the teachers, staff, and board members of Newington are able to have this opportunity, I think is exciting. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Yap. It's good to see you again.
Mrs. Hudvagner?
Thank you. Thank you for this presentation. I'm especially excited about making sure that our literature is culturally diverse and that students can either A, see themselves in the characters they're reading about, or B, allow literature to be that avenue that opens their eyes to others that are different from themselves and perhaps find commonalities beyond just what is seen in front of them. I wanted to ask, I can't remember who it was, but mentioned diving into some of the data. And I just wanted to see if that, and I can't remember who said it, said that like, it might have been Amy. Yeah, you said you were like shocked by some of the data. So I was wondering if that was scores and looking at the discrepancies in achievement gaps in our scores, or what data that was shocking, and when will that data come around again so we can see if the data paints a different picture due to these phenomenal efforts?
We looked at a lot of data last year, pretty much with everything, and we had just never broken down the data into subgroups in the way that we started to do last year. And so that's where we saw the discrepancies academically within some of our benchmark testing. But as I said, we also looked at discipline referrals and referrals to special education and to our early intervention process and absences. And so there were discrepancies across all types of data that we noticed, and we continue to look at the data. I mean, on a weekly basis, really, with our PLCs as a school, and several times a year as a district.
Okay, very good. Mr. Sharma, you're up next.
Hey, thanks a lot, Dr. Gerald, for coming over and
sure
talking about and giving us an update. I just had a quick question on: do you have systems or maybe how you could measure the impact that you all are making? Do you have any measurements? How would you measure especially I'm talking about the achievement gap? Because I think around 34%, 54, I think 54% of our students in our district are of color, and then our teaching staff. How much? Do you know the numbers in terms of our teaching staff? How is it how much are of color and how much are white?
I suppose that's a question for me. Thank you. Yes. I can tell you that the number of staff of color is low relative to the student enrollment. The exact number, I don't remember offhand, but it is low. And again, that's relative to the student enrollment. And I think that's the proportion to watch, is that you want those to be more closely aligned, the enrollment numbers. So that's a great question. The other question that you had was about the measurements. Yeah, I mean, it can be a little tricky only because the number of inputs that go into student performance are two things. Really, they're long. So they take a long time to actually hit and turn student performance, and they're many. So there are various inputs that would tell you that you're on track to do something that would improve student achievement. One example is referral to special education. You would want the shift in the kind of assessments to actually change if you wanted to improve appropriate referrals. But but appropriate would be a measure of one thing that would track all the way back to what you assessed, how you assessed for it, when you assessed for it, and the classroom implementation. So all of those things are the longness of it, in terms of what it would take to actually see something actually change on the front end. And it's each thing you'd have to measure. So that's really the place that we are. So we do have measures for change in terms of aptitude, what people know and understand and can master in terms of content that we give them, like around the 3 tenets of culturally responsive pedagogy. We do measure, and we are measuring through the audit, how people's aptitude turns into a change in practice. That's again a time dimension to measure, and what actually changes it quicker and what actually takes more time for the change to occur. Some of that can be as minute as the kind of professional development you received. Some of that can be multifaceted as the kind of coaching you receive over time on a topic. So your question is well placed. We are measuring everything that we do as an input, and we're measuring it for the effect that it has on our ultimate end goal of changing student outcomes. So that last thing just takes a little bit more time, but each thing we do measure, to Amy's point, as we do it. So that's a great question. But if you wanted to know what we measure, I can also send you that in a more sort of specific fashion.
Yeah, thanks a lot for your great work. Thanks.
Thank you. Great questions.
Mr. Farisi, would you happen to know what the ratio is?
I'm pleased to report that we're trying to continuously make that shift through our hiring practices, but our ratio is low. Our percentage of white educators is around 95 to 96% of certified educators. We do find that is a little bit different among our hourly staff, like paraeducators, tutors, but we continue to work on diversifying our workforce and keep those efforts moving forward.
Right. Ms. Weaver, you can go next. And then you can go
Yeah,
back
sorry,
to
just a follow-up too, because I noticed some of the language that was used, like the desire to fix data. And I know we as a board have gotten a lot of data over the years, particularly full board curriculum. We've seen that achievement gap, and we really just want to make sure all of our students get to a point where we can actually elevate all of our scores, right? Rising tide lifts all boats. So my question is more about kind of to our one, if we could get any information, because I really love the family involvement in terms of the family councils. If there's any kind of reports that will come out at the end of the year. And then two, how are counselors and social workers, in the line of us talking about this earlier, I just was wondering how they're coming into play with all of this equity training.
The counselor, I don't want to outkick my coverage on the counselors because we have something on the hopper that would include the counselor role. So I can just say that there is something being developed that would include counselors in a more natural way within the context of their role. And then the other question about the Families Council is really more, I'll sort of deflect to Dr. Brummett, but there is an increasing effort. And in fact, the survey that just went out to the town and the community is something that we do sort of have the results that we're working through now and analyzing. But I'm going to sort of punt to Dr. Brummett on that one to sort of talk about how that information is disseminated and that. But yeah, and that's a continuous effort to analyze our engagement with family and community. So we'll have more data to kind of that's in the feed.
And just to follow up to Dr. Hairston, we are still developing a communication plan around the survey, but what I will tell you is there was a high level of response, and when we analyzed the student data in particular, they were without a doubt 100% behind this work. Not a single negative comment from all the students that responded was seen, even by the folks that did all the analytics for us, and we're working on getting more student involvement onto our council, and that some of those efforts are ongoing. But I thought the board would like to hear that the students are clamoring for more diversity with our teachers, feeling a sense of belonging regardless of your background. So that is the spoiler alert for the survey results. More to come on that when we've developed our communication plan.
Thank you.
All right, Ms. Parati.
Thank you. Sorry. I appreciate both of, I can't even talk right now. I appreciate both of you sharing your journeys through this work that you're doing, and and at Amy at eGreen, starting a couple years ago, and just like knowing how important it was, I think is wonderful. And Sarah, when you said this, you're delivering the same materials to your students as you were given not that long ago, but I just think that both of you recognizing that a change needs to happen, and then doing everything you can to make that happen. So definitely appreciate the work that you're both doing. And Sarah, I think it was last year sometime, there was a news article, and there were three students who mentioned what you said, they were given texts that they saw themselves in, and they had the opportunity to read about their culture and not yours or ours, and they really appreciated it. So I think that that just shows that, hearing your perspective and having read that article last year, it just it was just really nice to hear how we got there as a district. So thank you for that. And then just one other thing, I was poking around on the website that you have, the Office of Equity and Inclusion, and I remember seeing some interviews of teachers of color and their backgrounds, and I thought that was amazing, and I would love more of that, and maybe more broadly distributed, because I'm not sure that everybody knows that website exists, or that these interviews are out there. And I think they're wonderful, especially to just let everyone hear their stories and see just more of the diversity that we do have in Newington. And obviously, hopefully we can get more, but I hope you update the website more, especially as Black History Month comes up and Women's History. So yes, and thank you again for the presentation.
Thank you for the feedback and the endorsement for that work. I appreciate that. Yes, more to come.
All right, well, thank you. So at this time, I want to give you guys thanks for what you've done, what you presented tonight. We look forward to future information coming forward to us, and have a great evening. Okay, so now I'm going to move us on to agenda item E2, and this is discussion on board policies, and I'm going to turn it over first to the committee chair.
All right, so we, at our last meeting, kind of pushed all these forward. We got a lot of feedback. We got feedback from the board, we got feedback from the community, and we're gonna talk about one at a time. The most probably, I don't want to say controversial because that's not the right word, but the one that we got the most feedback from was community relations, which was policy 1312. And I do appreciate the people who reached out and were very constructive and clear. I want to do a shout out to Mr. I never say your name right, Richard, and I apologize, but Mr. Laverriere did a phenomenal, I had asked at the last meeting, give me specific verbiage of how this isn't meeting your needs. And he did do that, which was huge, rather than just, saying there's a problem, but giving constructive feedback to the committee was huge. And that's really appreciated. So one of the big overarching problems in this policy was making sure that the public knew that we are looking for their feedback and their concerns, as well as if they felt like they wanted to keep it anonymous, that they could. And we had a rich discussion about that. So with everything, I don't think we need to go through like the whole background from last time, but these are all the changes that we made from all of that feedback. And there's a lot of them. So the yellow and then the crossed out. So it was original, and then it was yellow, and then the cross out was the feedback, and the green is the new. So it was sent out to everyone. So hopefully everyone had a chance to read it. So.
All right, so what I'm going to do when we open up for discussion, once again, we're going to give each board member an opportunity to share and ask questions one time. Okay, so who would like to go first? Miss
Yeah, and
Weaver.
just wanted to say, I'm so sorry, Mr. Policy meeting last week. Love my policy crew. Sorry, Steve. I just had a question about the last paragraph. No issues with it necessarily. It starts with a procedure for processing and responding, should be established. I'm just wondering if that's referring to our other policy, regarding materials. And just when it said, and this is just my brain thinking, this procedure shall include a formal signed complaint of standard format. I'm just not sure what a standard format is. We talked, I
actually
know,
had
I'm
a
so sorry. I tried to watch the minutes.
No. It
It's
wasn't
been
even
a
a
week.
matter of the minutes. We talked a lot about that and did that even, because it did, of course, refer back to the curriculum. And then we talked about having a curriculum meeting and maybe a joint meeting with the curriculum because it is kind of all intertwined. After the discussion we came up with was that all complaints can be given. Anonymous complaints are welcome. But when it came to a specific concern about material, without having it be non-anonymous, it was very hard to get that feedback and stuff like that. So when we talked about including a formal signed complaint, Mr. Parisi said an email, just putting it, not just off the cuff, running into me at the grocery store and saying, hey, I really don't like that you're teaching Tom Sawyer. Is that even a book? Is that a book?
And if I could add, when it reads approved material, that's really questioning you all. The board has approved the materials, right, to move forward. So curriculum committee may have approved it. We need to see that in some form so we can take action with that.
Yeah, I think just to follow up is more of how does the public perceive the word standard format and what that means? Do we need to clarify that out in writing? That's just my only kind of, and when it says a procedure established, that kind of lends itself, again, where we, as we a policy committee like to distinguish, we are policymakers, not policy implementers. So the procedure being established would be the implementation on the administrative side. Totally fine with that because that's where that process happens. I just want to make sure that that is understood when we say a standard format. I could see where there's area of confusion where if I'm looking at this, say I didn't have any context, to me, I was like, what is a standard format? If we need to say it, I just maybe say in a written form. I don't know if standard format needs to be there. And I guess that's nitpicky, but yes. Or refer to the actual library and media materials policy, if that.
I can just respond because as many of you know, we do have a reconsideration guideline. So that's the backup to that. A procedure for processing and responding will be followed. This procedure shall include, it does. Within that reconsideration guidelines, there is a form that we would give to the person if it went to a formal complaint. So somebody might make an informal complaint and then it would be handled at that level. Usually that it's resolved there. But if they were to say, I want to put in a formal complaint, we have a actual form that we give them to get the information we need for that complaint to go forward when we're reconsidering materials.
Okay, so maybe we just reference it.
So I think that's what you're saying, Jessica, about that's the backup to, this is just saying that shall be established. The backup is that is established.
But I also think that we need to not be, have blinders on. This isn't just about materials that have to do with reading, right? So someone could not have a concern about a biology book. They could have a concern about a math textbook. So this is any materials that are approved. So to answer your question about, is this library, well, that's one of the sources of materials, but.
And so to me, this speaks to, I'm given the charge now, once this policy is potentially approved, that we have to put a regulation behind it that would contain that document.
Yeah, I think my only was just the verbiage of standard format. Maybe just say examples, i.e. email, whatever.
Any other questions on this policy? Okay, well, I don't see any hands up online. There are no more in here. So this is going to be moved forward to our next meeting for action. We're going to move on to the next one. Chairperson.
The next one we talked about was policy 5118, admission of non-resident students. We had a conversation about that. Ms. Yap had reached out and said that she felt that this was a finance, it should be a joint. And so we actually didn't really discuss this because we wanted to bring it to the board and say, was this a finance policy joint thing, or was it not? Because, so we didn't really spend much time on that because of that. So I'm bringing it to the board.
Go ahead, Michelle.
Okay, so just a little background on why I feel like it's a finance, should be a finance joint meeting. Although it does, and I know they said we had one inquiry, say that the existing class could, that pay the 50%. My concern was, and someone correct me if I'm wrong, if I allowed, just teachers to allow the students, okay.
Any
Employee. So if I allow a staff member to come in at 50%, and let's say the child comes in and then they somehow end up needing a 504 plan. Okay, so now the 50% now has grown. And I know legally we have to adhere to these plans. So I'm concerned, and I think it should be because our special education budget, like it eats up so much of our budget, and we have so many other things and needs right now. Like we need counselors. I mean, we need social workers. We need, just different things for the students. I'm concerned that it can turn into a larger bill than what it's intended, because you can't control what can happen or what may happen. So my biggest concern is, yes, you're coming in at 50%. I think it was like $9,000 or something like that. But what happens if this child needs a 504 plan and then it's 50% plus, I'm just gonna throw out speech, OT, all these different things. The bill just became larger, and we take on that bill because we have to, because it's now a 504 plan. It's not just the 50% tuition, and that can grow, really quickly.
Sure. Stipulated, right? I appreciate that question. I think that is something that when we received this inquiry and noticed that we didn't have a policy to address our employees, but other districts around us did, we really researched and looked at, what do the other districts do and how do they account for things like that, so it doesn't grow to be this enormous burden that maybe we can't financially afford, right? So I think that's why we have in the yellow highlighted area that very last sentence that then refers back up to the top paragraph, which is very clear that that would be the responsibility of the employee to pay for that.
But I think that once a 504 plan is established,
Sorry.
it's not what is, sorry, too fast. So I think, and I just would wonder if anybody can research that, because if I'm a parent and my child comes in with no issues, what happens if I say those issues develop because, I'm just gonna throw it out there, I'm a minority student in your white town, and now these issues have developed. How do you know that that responsibility doesn't come on you? If that parent, let's say I'm a parent, I challenge that. And I'm gonna say, I developed these issues because of your school system, because you weren't as diverse. I'm just gonna make that up. So then there is a burden on the school system, although it's in your policy, because there are those little fine things, those little fine details, which do hold you accountable. So although your policy may say something, I think there are statutes that kind of supersede just this board policy. And I was looking into it, and I need to research further, but that is something, if I decide that and I can prove it, you're paying for it. So, thank you.
Well, I was just going to add, rarely, I don't think this will happen very often, but we will write up a contract with the individual. So in that contract, it will clearly articulate, here's the tuition, here's what it covers, and if you require special ed or additional services, and it does say it at the bottom of this,
I was gonna say
when
it's in the
accepted into a
policy.
special ed program, the
Yeah.
tuition cost shall be the total of all costs associated with that minus what you've already paid for the general curriculum. So while we're giving them a 50% discount on the tuition, they will pay the full cost of all other expenses. So, and we would work with probably our attorneys to make the contract airtight and make sure that we don't get into pitfalls as described by Ms. Yap, because I think that's a legitimate question, but I think we need to protect ourselves through a well-written contract with the families.
Okay, Ms. Weaver?
Yeah, so I think that's a great point, because I was just wondering, when it says in the paragraph previously, it says when a student is accepted into a special education program, the tuition cost shall be the total of any XX costs of the program and services provided beyond the general education. So I'm not sure if that's referenced in state statute, so it's a well taken point. I'm not sure if then, to Dr. Brummett's point, if we need to add something about a written contract shall be, or pursuant to that, something of language of the sort that we can add that, or needs to be added to be able to say that. Again, I'm not sure, as we struggle with it all the time in terms of policy, what needs to be written out in the policy in terms of what is the actual policy versus how it's actually implemented, which relies on our administration. So I just wanted to make sure there's a differentiation there, and if that is okay, then I think the language is fine, but if that needs to be added.
Is this pertaining to the question you've already asked? Or briefly?
Okay, so I was gonna ask, I guess, the board, if maybe we can, or Ms. Dr. Brummett, if she could maybe consult with the attorney prior to us making this decision, because I just want to make sure we're protected as a school system and as a board. I just don't want to cross that bridge and get into any financial decisions. So if we can't like vote on this today, I don't know how I say that.
We're not voting
Or just
on
even
this.
move it forward to the next meeting until we go through the attorneys and make sure that we're protected.
Yeah,
Thank you.
definitely. Any other questions on this? Okay, we will carry this forward to our next board meeting.
Dr. Fletcher, online.
All right, Mr. Leverrier?
Yeah, I agree with Ms. Yap that maybe we should go to the attorney in order to make sure that the verbiage is perfect before we do move it forward to voting. I do recommend that we do that.
All right, thank you. And we will definitely do that. All right, let's move on to the next one.
I don't think the next one's going to be very controversial, but that's okay.
We'll see.
Admission of non-resident students, policy 511H. We just wanted to change project concern because I think that goes back to the 80s, and it is now called open choice.
Does anyone have any question on that? Thank you very much. Let's move on to the next one.
Well, in your packet, you'll see policy 3240. That is the recommended removal because we took that and combined it into the policy we just discussed.
So removing the policy altogether.
Correct, because we took this and we applied it to the previous policy. It was a recommended combination as well as some of the.
Oh, okay. So we'll be voting on that.
It was good.
Yeah. All right, very good. We can move on to
All right,
the
so
next
the
one.
next one was bylaws of the board, policy number 9132. We got feedback. The concern from a board member was that the concern was to make sure that our wording represented that a chairperson absolutely of a committee can call a meeting. And we went back and forth and we read it, and the only thing we talked about was taking out and board chair, because as we had the conversation of people who were on different policies, different chairs on that policy, we don't consult with Dr. Fletcher. So we said, well, we don't do that. So let's take that out. And so we didn't read it as anything other than the chairperson of each committee can call a meeting, period, stop. And we said, it says it clear. So I don't know. I'm sure there's going to be discussion. I shouldn't say I'm sure. I don't know if there's discussion about that.
Is there any discussion on this? Mr. Miranda?
I understand the rationale. I think maybe, and I don't know if it needs to be some sort of like actual written policy, but I think informing the board chair of committee meetings specifically because the working relationship between the board chair and the superintendent and then the superintendent to the staff, I don't know if it needs to be deleted. I personally think it's a good idea for the board chair to be fully informed of meetings without the superintendent having to say, hey, board chair, we've had 4 curriculum meetings this week and it's getting a little bit tough to handle. And then we have this issue where we go round and round. I just think personally, just when I read it, and I'm glad you explained it, that was the only thing that stuck out. I just think the board chair should be informed of the meetings.
I'll just address that very quickly. I am informed of every committee meeting Okay, so I do receive an email based on that. I think that the wording here is basically that it doesn't have to be run through me for approval. But I do want to reiterate, it says that you shall work with the superintendent or designate to schedule, revise, or cancel meetings, as well as setting of the meeting agendas.
So just the understanding, so we said superintendent and then it said or designate, that's how we had it last time when we got together. So the conversation was like, when we meet as the policy committee, I don't talk to you, sorry, but I talk to Steve because he's my designate, right? He's the person who is relevant in that particular situation. I choose my words, right? So like finance would have to talk to Lou and Dr. Right. So I guess that's why we like that person has to be involved. Like you need to talk to Wendy. Like you can't just have, I mean, and then we did have the conversation. What if we wanted to have a meeting and you weren't around and like.
Then you would defer to Dr. Brummett. The designee is unavailable. We really just, I thought the best part of the conversation is we just really took a deep look at what are our current practices. The chair and the designee really work together to put meetings together. And then I know Mrs. Kraus, like we then always make certain that the superintendent and the chair person of the Board of Education are informed of when we're meeting, what we'll be doing, the agenda, all those items. So.
And then in addition to that, in the conversation we had, and we want to make sure that it's happening, is that that the committee, whether it's the chair or the committee, I mean, we work on that committee kind of all together. Like we like say to Steve, like, hey, we got to talk about this. Let's add it to the policy, and it's added. So it's the chair and the committee who drive that agenda. And then if there's something else that, you know, Steve needs to add, he goes, hey, I need to add this too. Okay, we need to add this. And a lot of times, like there's policies, you're like, we need to talk about this. I'm like, okay, but it's a collegial conversation. It's not between the chair and the designee, so.
Right. Any further questions, Ms. Young?
I was gonna I personally haven't had any issues with my finance committee. I work with, we had a joint meeting, actually, it went really well with Dr. Fletcher, Dr. Brummett and Liv, and Danielle and Sam, because we're on both committees. So I haven't had that issue with anything I wanted to add. I could understand. I may usually email both. I haven't had any problems, but I don't know if you feel like it needs to be deleted, but I haven't had any issues.
All right, very good. No further, okay, go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to add for public too, like when we get notified, you also get notified. Like it's always the public. So not only is the board chair abreast, so is the public.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are. And there is always an online link is always available, correct? Okay.
I'm just to also in that policy, there's just a couple words that we took out because they were redundant and they didn't make sense. So.
Okay.
The next page.
Is this all? On 9132, it says we're changing Lou. He's on the finance committee. Is he now going to be an ex officio because he's currently a voting member? That's what it says in section 4. He was never an ex officio. He was a voting member on our committee. So is he now? It says the business manager of the district, which is Lou, shall be an ex officio member of this committee. He's currently a voting member. What's the difference between him? I mean, is it just because he's always been a voting member?
It's official language.
Okay. So he was the finance committee. For some reason, you've always been a voting member. You've never been an ex officio. I'm okay with it. But now you'd be an ex officio. I saw there was a change.
Can I respond on that? Go ahead.
In the early days of these committees being established, which started around 1998, 1999, yeah, I was always an ex officio. I think there was just a typo done when they were lifting and updating copies of the policies. So I am not aware of any action that ever allowed my role to become a voting member. So if I was, you know, if it's something, I would just abstain all the time. I wouldn't participate in the vote because that's was never what the intent of the committee setup was.
Thank you. Yeah, we ran it by James as well, and he concurred this was the way to go.
All right. No further questions. We'll move on to the next one.
Online.
Mr. LaVerriere?
Yes. As to the underneath the yellow on the first page, I mean, I think that it would be where I think that the next sentence, I don't think that that's appropriate, having that the chair of the Board of Education may at any time discontinue any of the committees or specific duty assigned. I mean, as to the duties assigned, if a person is appointed to a specific role on a committee, I don't think that I don't think it's appropriate for a chair to have unilateral authority to make such a decision to discontinue the role. That should be, if such a decision was to be made, I think that should be changed to the full board as a whole, not as a single person changing duties assigned. I maybe request that that get amended. I don't know if anybody else agrees.
No, I don't agree.
Well,
Because according to Robert's Rules of Orders, the chair has the authority to appoint and to remove. To take that away would be to just take away the responsibility that is already afforded them. I'm not talking about myself, just myself. I'm talking about in the future. That is a board chair prerogative.
Right. I'm saying that I don't think it should be the rule of this board, though. That's my input on that.
I appreciate your input. You won't get my support. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think because we all elect a board chair, to me, it's like we as a board fully voted to elect the board chair. So then the board chair is the one that presides over. So to me, it's like we put faith in our board chair to then carry out the duties of a board chair.
Anybody else have a question on that or a comment? All right, can we move on?
All right, the next one is student discipline, policy 5144. We had to make some changes just because of state statutes, right, Mr. Parisi?
That is correct, yes.
So why don't you take this one?
So I think it's about 4 or 5 pages in, everyone there. And so we had discussed that these are state statute changes that were required by law. So we did put those in. And last meeting, there was a discussion, last full board meeting, around parents or guardians of the minor student being informed when an intervention meeting is called. And you see that actually in the next section procedures governing removal from class. It's item D there. And so we borrowed the similar language to address the concern that was brought about to make sure that it was in writing. We did discuss, I believe, if you recall that meeting, that it is a practice. It just wasn't in writing. So we did memorialize it in the policy.
Any questions? Okay, do we have another one for discussion?
I think there's one more. Yeah, I'm getting there. Alrighty, so 5113.21, it's the last page. Isn't this the one that we said we couldn't talk about because of the wellness and you needed to get us more information?
Yes.
All right, so we had talked about this and we brought some questions to Mr. Parisi about the wellness days. We wanted to add more, but we wanted to the mental health days. We needed information. So I don't even think we didn't make any changes because we didn't have that information.
So that is accurate. We're starting to gather a nice amount of research that our committee will be engaging in shortly to determine that between the legislation and how it reads and the impact it could have on students in regards to both truancy and chronic absenteeism. We do need to really and carefully look all that over before we make a decision on just adding the recommendation was to add another mental health wellness day for students going from 2 to 3. The statutes are pretty clear about the limitations of 2, as well as the impact that could have on both truancy and chronic absenteeism. So I just think we really need to do a thorough and comprehensive look at all that before we make a decision that could actually negatively impact students.
Any questions related to that?
All right, so I just want to, for the board, the next two that we're going to bring up we had already talked about. There was no changes that were asked. There's nothing that I think there was like one word we needed to change, but there was no more need for further discussion. So
These are the action items, correct?
yeah, these are
And
the
the
action
action
items. So we're
items.
hoping that we can take action on them. The first one is policy 616.1, library media selection. And the only change we made was we went back and forth like on the word center in the first thing, but we had already had this conversation last time.
Okay, so following procedure, I'll let somebody read the motion.
Okay. Move the Board of Education approve the revisions to policy 6161-1, library media material selection as recommended.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. It's now open for discussion, if there is any. Questions? Then I'm going to ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Michael Branda,
Yes.
Danielle Droz.
Yes.
Dr. Bruce Fletcher,
Yes.
Beth Mankey Wagner,
Yes.
Richard LaVerriere,
Yes.
Amy Parati,
Yes.
Sam Sharma,
Yes.
Jessica Weaver,
Yes.
Anastasia Yap.
Yes.
The motion passed unanimously.
Excellent. Let's move on to policy 5113.2.
All right, again, this policy was about truancy. We talked about it at the last meeting discussion. There was nothing to change, so we are hoping to take action on it.
All right, I will let somebody entertain that motion and make it. Go ahead, Ms. Weaver.
Move the Board of Education approve the revisions to policy 5113.2, truancy as recommended.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Any further discussion? I'm going to ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Michael Branda,
Yes.
Danielle Droz,
Yes.
Dr. Bruce Fletcher,
Yes.
Beth Mankey Wagner,
Yes.
Richard LaVerriere,
Yes.
Amy Parati,
Yes.
Sam Sharma,
Yes.
Jessica Weaver,
Yes.
Anastasia.
Yes.
All right, Mr. LaVerriere, if you could please close your mic, and Mr. Sharma.
Oh, sure.
Thank you very much. All right, so that concludes agenda item E. All of our action has been taken place. At this time, I'm going to move on to item F, which is public participation on any matter related to board responsibilities. You can call us using the number 860-665-8659. Or if you are a member of the public and you're online with us, you can raise your hand and I will call on you. We do limit civil participation to 3 minutes. And it's the sound that every tired board member likes to hear. Crickets. Okay. Yes, we're going to now go to agenda item G, which are final remarks by board members. So we can go, we'll start with you since you raised your hand and we'll move around the table.
Real quick, I just want to say thank you to, like I said, I attended the John Wallace PTA PAC meeting. Really great. They're so efficient. And they're also doing such incredible things. I'm so excited to hear about their 8th grade dance. So excited to hear about all of their fundraisings. Run a really tight ship. So thank you so much. I did want to say too, as we head into budget season, I'm hoping we can maybe set up, I emailed everyone, but like a joint meeting with Town Council and Board of Ed. Dr. Brummett will be presenting the Board of Ed. I know the mayor's attending, so I'm really excited on February 1st. So I think this will be a great budget season. I know it'll be another tough one, but I'm really looking forward to working collaboratively on that. And the last thing I just wanted to say on a personal note, I'm not sure if this is the venue, but I don't know if anyone's seen the news, but the state lost a representative this week.
Yes.
Quentin Q. Williams, who was a friend and a mentor to me. One of his biggest passions was getting young people into civic education, and he was a huge advocate for education. So just wanted to let the community know please look him up, look at all the amazing things he did. And for students of our community, he's definitely a model for what public service is like. And I think you all should just learn more about Q. And for those wondering, rememberingq.com, if you know him, he was a really special person to me. So I pray for his family, and anyone who wants to know more, please look him up. Thanks.
Mr. Leverrier, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I want to say that I very much appreciate working with the policy subcommittee. I mean, not every single one of my concerns or the public's concerns were met perfectly, but the policies that we came up with, I do think that they are pretty good. I think that everybody got some of what they want, and I think that they came out pretty good, and I appreciate working with you all on that. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? Go ahead.
I'm going to do a quick shout out. If you're ever looking for something, and this goes back to what the student rep said, she brought up the, I should know what it's called, and I always call it show choir. Chamber choir. If you are ever see chamber choir, they play all over. They've sung at like Stu Leonard's. You want to see what your tax dollars do? Like, holy moly, go listen to them sing. You will get goosebumps. Your heart will be filled with joy. And if you see like a chorus, like a concert at the high school, like jump in. Like, they are amazing. And again, kudos to the music department.
And you are so right about that. Mrs. Hudwagner?
I just wanted to say thank you to Mr. Farisi, because I know the policy meetings, they're a lot, and it's really important work. And he just does a really great job of, like, there's a lot of talking and just a lot of everything. He captures it all and strikes and highlights and changes font colors, and it's just very impressive. And so thank you for your patience and for your hard work. It's clearly a team process, but you're a great driver. And Danielle, thank you for your leadership and getting it done and getting us to where we need to go.
Well, I appreciate that very much. And I appreciate working with all of you and everyone who's been, kind of sharing with us ideas and thoughts for us to consider, because I think that's been the best part of the work. So thank you all so much.
And you guys are the busiest committee that we have. Ms. Young?
I just want to say thank you, everybody. I know we all take our time out and we have families, and this goes on sometimes for a while. And thank you, Mr. Farisi. And actually, thank you, Danielle, for, I was one of the people who advocated for the additional mental health day. So I do appreciate you just even considering it and looking into it. I also wanted to say, we know that we had that bus accident, and I saw the video today, and it took me back. I just had one myself, but I wanted to say, I would like to advocate to nominate the driver, because I watched that on the way here. Mark, in regards to just how he handled that situation, just watching that gave me goosebumps. So thank you, and I hope we could, nominate him as an everyday hero. And I'm excited to get into budget season, and yeah, let's get ready for this again. Thank you.
So first of all, I heard that there were some people at John Patterson with clipboards. That was the, I think you were on your rounds, and it was like, well, Dr. Brummett was there, and I'm like, all right. And my daughter's like, there were two other people, and I'm like, Mrs. Krause, she remembers you. Every time I say Mrs. Krause, she remembers who you are. It's like, yes. And I'm like, and Mr. Farisi? Yes. So apparently the rounds are going well. I love hearing about them. And it's funny to hear how the students are, they think that they're being watched. And then they're like, my teacher was being watched. And they, it's great. I think it's a great thing for our district. I wrote a couple of quick notes on this because I didn't want to ramble on this part, but I probably still will. So obviously, I think everybody at this table heard the story in Virginia with the teacher in her classroom. It really, I feel like every time we're about to have a meeting, something happens in our country with our educators. And educating our kids is the easiest job in the world for anybody who's never stepped foot in the classroom, for anybody who just gets to sit back and watch on Facebook all the things that happen in classrooms that are exaggerated, or they don't really understand the day-to-day. They get to see a 5-minute video instead of what led up to it or everything that's happened that week or that month or that year. Our educators, they dedicate their lives to educating our children. And obviously we have a lot at this table. And I've spoken a lot this year about trying to just make sure that we are doing everything we can to make sure our educators are okay. And I know when I first brought it up, you had brought up some updates that there was some work being done. And I would just love to keep hearing about that, because we do, rightfully so, talk about social emotional learning, and we talk about making sure that our kids are okay and supporting them and doing all the things. But then guess what? It's going to be budget season, and some of those budget dollars go towards making sure our educators are okay and they have what they need. And I just hope that everybody can take a step back and realize, in terms of the budget, first and foremost, that a lot of what's being asked for is for our educators to educate our kids. The educators in our district play a critical role in building that budget. It's not just a number plucked out of the sky. And I hope that as we start to hear from all the department leaders, all the program leaders, that we start to, as a community, just really think about that these are needs and not wants. These are things that they're telling us as a town that they need to better serve our kids. But then on top of that, trying to think of creative ways to make sure that they're okay, because it's not just a budget that makes them okay. It's making sure that they have a support system inside their school, maybe within the district, meeting peers in other buildings that they usually don't get to meet, but, just talking about their days and having that opportunity, because as most of you know, they take it all home with them. And that is, that's a weight on people who, they have their kids. Like you mentioned, we're here away from our kids. Well, the teachers have their kids in the classroom, and then they go home to their kids at home. And sometimes they don't have enough time to process what happened throughout their day, or what happened to a student that they, have been working with for so long and things went terribly wrong today. So I just hope that we can continue the work that I know has started in the district and keep hearing updates about how we're doing and how we're supporting the educators, not only in a budget process, but just in a day-to-day social and emotional capacity. Thanks.
Ms. Parati.
Thank you. Yeah, I was kind of similar lines as what you were just saying about the budget, and same with Jessica too. Budget season's coming up, and I think that it's very important for everybody to pay attention, not to the number. As you said, pay attention to what's behind the number. Last night at the town council meeting, Councilor Page had said, previous town manager has said 0 across the board. And he wants to hear what the departments need, not what they want, what they need to run a successful department. Same goes for Board of Ed. And I think it's very important. We've got a huge budget, rightfully so. And I think we have several departments in that budget, and everybody is working really hard what they need to run a really good school system, which we have in Newington and we want to maintain. And all those teachers and paras and staff and admin, everyone needs to be supported, not just the number, but with, our efforts in the budget season. So I think, I hope that the town council joins us and participates in and understands what's behind the numbers, because everybody, just deserves to be supported in all ways. And then just a funny, or not a funny, but just a feel good story. My third grader got off the bus the other day, and she was like, "You'll never guess who my art sub was." And it was a recent high school grad. And she was so excited to see her. She knew who she was from extracurricular. And she was so excited that she was in the classroom and, come home from college and teaching at subbing. And then just yesterday, my oldest daughter, same thing. There was somebody who was a summer counselor at camp, and he came back and he was subbing. And she was just so excited to see just people that they know in the community. So thank you for, I'm assuming you have something to do with that, Mr. Parisi, but thank you for allowing recent grads to come back to Newington and give back to the community. I think it was just awesome. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Very briefly, you talked about Virginia with a teacher being shot. I received word today that there was a teacher at my old high school that was shot. Fortunately, it was just a pellet gun, but 2 students came in armed with pellet guns and shot a teacher. So we are at a critical stage in this country. And I think that we as board members need to be conscious of this, and we need to do everything that we can to make sure that all of our buildings are secured. And I believe that the people of the town are going to be behind us 100% when it comes to that. Because, you know, as an educator, I don't want to walk into a building thinking that somebody's going to shoot me and there's nothing that I can do about it. So I think it's time that we all need to rethink this, and there a lot of changes need to be made. I want to say thank you, each of you. You want to talk after? Yes. He was already, yeah. So I want to say thank you for your participation tonight and helping us to move things along smoothly, but I want to thank you for covering for me in the last board meeting that we had because I had a family emergency. And I hear that you did so well that they were considering voting you into my chair. Yes, yes, there is. The handle is right on the side of the chair. You pull up and it comes up. There's your raise. But I want to say thank you. Well, yeah, I'm sure you did. I'm sure you did. So thank you very much. Dr. Brummett?
All right, so ending on a super positive note, yes, I think you'll hear more about security and the capital budget proposal, which the Finance Subcommittee has already alluded to. Some positives. We have Superintendent of the Outstanding Student of the Month on the 30th. We have 2 people with connections to the board being honored. Jimmy Vendetti, our board rep emeritus, as I call him. And then we have Mr. Branda's daughter getting awarded. So please join us or stream in. We will be live streaming it provided our tech team can make it over here. And then to Ms. Weaver's comments, we're going to actively continue to invite our folks from the town. I have invited the night of my budget presentation, Representative Curry, who's co-chair of the Ed Committee, along with the State School Finance Project, so that folks can really get a good handle on state funding and how that all comes down to education. I think it'll be a good meeting for the board. They'll kick it off, and then I'll bring up the rear with my budget presentation. But I think, again, I will stress again to our town counterparts that we'd love to have them there to be part of that process and learning experience. And I've already extended that invitation to the mayor personally, and I will do the same for the rest of the council. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And
Motion to adjourn.
motion's made and seconded. You are adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Oh my God, Mr. Branda, congrats.
So when we got the letter, like she was at a friend's. My wife
Yeah.
opened it because she thought it was,
Like
because Rose had been absent 5 times when we got the letter, like warning, like, I mean, we don't send her when she's sick.
Yeah.
And then she got the flu right before Christmas,
God, I
so she's
know.
out. So
So
my wife thought it was like the letter of them yelling